the king of pop's meteoric rise. It all started in a small house on Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana. 10 kids, a steelworker father with a strict hand, and a mother who tried to keep the peace. But one of those kids, Michael, was different. You'd think he was shy if you met him off stage, almost timid. But when he stepped into the spotlight, something changed. He wasn't just performing. He was pulling you into his world. And by the time he was 6 years old, people already knew they were witnessing something special. Michael grew up in a family where music wasn't a hobby. It was survival. His father, Joseph, didn't care about childhood or playtime. He cared about results. The Jackson brothers rehearsed for hours, sometimes until their feet ached and their voices cracked. For Michael, the youngest in the group, there was no room for mistakes. Joseph was relentless. But Michael's talent was undeniable, and it didn't take long for the Jackson 5 to go from local talent shows to Motown Records, where everything changed. By 1969, the Jackson 5 was on fire. Their first single, I Want You Back, was a phenomenon. People couldn't get enough of Michael's voice. It had a kind of soul and vulnerability that didn't make sense coming from an 11-year-old. And it wasn't just his singing on stage. He had a presence that made grown men and women stop in their tracks. It wasn't rehearsed. It was instinctual. By the time ABC and I'll Be There topped the charts, the Jackson 5 was a household name, but even then, the spotlight was starting to shift toward Michael. While his brothers were content riding the wave of the group's success, Michael wasn't. He wasn't looking for fame, he already had that. He wanted something more. In 1971, he started releasing solo songs, and by 1979, he dropped off the wall. That album exploded. Tracks like Don't Stop, Till You Get Enough and Rock With You had a groove, an energy that felt fresh and untouchable. And this wasn't a group effort. This was all Michael. It was the moment he stepped out of the shadow of his brothers and made it clear. He wasn't just another pop singer. Then came Thriller. If Off the Wall was the spark, Thriller was the wildfire. Released in 1982, it wasn't just successful, it changed the game. The album sold millions, broke records, and redefined what pop music could be. Tracks like Billie Jean and Beat It became cultural landmarks, and the Thriller music video? That was something no one had ever seen before. 13 minutes of zombies, horror, and some of the most iconic choreography ever put on screen. MTV played it on repeat, and fans couldn't get enough. And then there was the moonwalk. It's 1983, and Michael is performing Billie Jean at the Motown 25th anniversary show. The audience is electric, but then it happens. He glides backward across the stage as if gravity doesn't apply to him. That single performance cemented him as a global icon. By the mid-80s, Michael was untouchable. He was selling out stadiums, dominating charts, and turning every music video into a cultural event. But behind the glittering suits and the screaming fans, something darker was brewing. Fame on that level doesn't come without a price, and Michael was already starting to feel the cracks forming beneath the surface. What happens when the world puts you on a pedestal, but you can't step down? The price of stardom. By the mid-80s, Michael Jackson had everything, or so it seemed. He was the most recognizable face on the planet, with album sales and fan hysteria that most artists could only dream of. But behind the glitz and the fame was a man grappling with an overwhelming question. Who was he, really? Fame had turned him into an untouchable figure, but it also trapped him in a world where authenticity seemed impossible. Growing up in the Jackson family was a constant fight to meet impossible standards. Joseph Jackson's strict rules left little room for individuality. Michael wasn't a kid discovering who he was. He was a product being molded to succeed. Those early years were full of rehearsals, expectations, and a relentless demand to be perfect. And while his talent skyrocketed the Jackson 5 to fame, it also turned Michael into something he never wanted to be, a commodity. As his solo career soared, the pressure only intensified. Everything Michael did was dissected by the media, from his relationships to the way he walked and talked. But nothing attracted more attention than his appearance. In the late 70s, people started noticing changes. His skin seemed lighter, his nose slimmer, his jaw more defined. At first, the rumors were small. Maybe he'd had some minor cosmetic work done. But by the mid-80s, the speculation reached a fever pitch. Michael insisted he had vitiligo, a condition that causes patches of skin to lose pigmentation. And while medical reports later confirmed his diagnosis, the media didn't care. Tabloids ran wild with stories about skin bleaching and identity issues. It didn't help that Michael remained private, rarely explaining himself to the public. The silence only fueled the rumors. Fans defended him passionately, but critics painted him as someone desperate to erase his blackness. It wasn't just his skin that changed. Michael's face seemed to transform over the years, with his features becoming more delicate and angular. People began to question if the boy who sang ABC was even the same person anymore. Every change added to the mystery, and the world became obsessed with trying to figure out what was going on behind the mask. For Michael, the scrutiny was suffocating. He once described looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back. The world demanded perfection from him, but perfection came at a price. He was a prisoner of his own image, trapped in a cycle of trying to meet expectations while also desperately trying to escape them. His iconic look, the single glove, the fedora, the sequin jackets, became armor, a way to distract from the vulnerability he felt underneath. The isolation didn't help. Michael's fame was so immense that it left him with very few people he could trust. Even those closest to him often had ulterior motives, whether it was money, status, or access. Friends turned into opportunists, and Michael retreated further into his own world. Neverland Ranch, his sprawling estate in California, was meant to be an escape, a place where he could relive the childhood he felt he never had. But even there, he couldn't escape the eyes of the world. The media coined the nickname Wacko Jacko, a label that haunted Michael for years. Every eccentricity, his pet chimpanzee, Bubbles, his high-pitched speaking voice, his love for theme parks, became fodder for ridicule. It didn't matter that these things brought him joy. To the outside world, they were just more evidence that he was losing touch with reality. And the more the media pushed this narrative, the more Michael seemed to lean into it, creating a persona that blurred the lines between the real man and the myth. But the changes weren't just physical or external. Those closest to Michael described a man who was constantly at war with himself. He was deeply insecure, despite his success, and struggled with feelings of inadequacy. Fame didn't protect him from pain, it magnified it. The boy who once danced with carefree joy now moved with the weight of the world on his shoulders. How does someone so loved by millions end up feeling so utterly alone? Maybe this is what led to Michael building his own sanctuary, but instead became a source of his darkest controversies. We're talking about Neverland Ranch. Neverland, a dream or a nightmare? Neverland Ranch was supposed to be Michael Jackson's paradise. Built in the late 1980s, this sprawling estate in Santa Barbara County, California, was a fantasy come to life. Inspired by the tale of Peter Pan, Neverland symbolized everything Michael felt he had missed as a child: freedom, fun, and the innocence of youth. But as the years went on, it became something much darker. A place where admiration and scrutiny collided, ultimately unraveling Michael's carefully crafted image. When Michael bought the property in 1988, he transformed it into something the world had never seen before. Neverland wasn't just a mansion. It was an amusement park, complete with a Ferris wheel, a carousel, a zoo, and even a movie theater. It wasn't just for show. Michael regularly invited children, families, and underprivileged kids to experience the magic. For Michael, Neverland was an escape from the pressure and judgment of the outside world. Michael often spoke about how he felt robbed of his childhood, forced to rehearse and perform while other kids his age were riding bikes or playing tag. Neverland was his way of recreating that lost innocence. It was a sanctuary where he could live out his fantasies and surround himself with joy and laughter. To his fans, it was a testament to Michael's generosity and childlike wonder. But to his critics, it was something else entirely. By the early 90s, whispers about Neverland began to circulate. The first cracks in the utopian image came in 1993, when Michael was accused of child molestation. The accusations sent shockwaves around the world, and Neverland became the center of the controversy. What was once a magical kingdom now seemed shrouded in suspicion. Every aspect of Michael's life at Neverland was scrutinized: who visited, how often, and under what circumstances. The media had a field day. Paparazzi swarmed the property, and tabloid headlines painted Michael as a man living in his own twisted fairy tale. His close relationships with young boys, including sleepovers at Neverland, became the focal point of endless speculation. Michael defended himself, saying there was nothing sinister about his actions. To him, Neverland was a place where children could feel safe and loved, away from the harsh realities of the world. He often said he related to kids better than adults because they didn't judge him. But the damage was done. The 1993 allegations were settled out of court.